Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at the new BitFenix Phenom. Now I've got two here. I have a white one and a black one, but I've also got the MATX, so the tiny little ITX board one, and then I've also got the MATX one, which is the new version that they flipped around. Now there are a lot of similarities between these two and the Prodigy versions. It's really only an aesthetics look that's changed really, so you can kind of flip between the two and be able to make, you know, your kind of decisions on them. But there are a couple of points that I do need to make about the performance impact because of the aesthetics changes as we work our way through the review. First thing I do need to say though, 75 quid. The prices have snuck up a little bit since the original Prodigy release, but not by a huge amount considering some of the price increases that have happened elsewhere in the market. So they're still very, very competitive on their prices. And obviously it's now good that we're getting the same kind of look cases, but then with different hardware options available on the inside. But that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking a look at the difference between the two, and you know what kind of impact that might have on performance, hardware that you can fit in there, and all that kind of stuff. Well, because we've got two, and there are, you know, differences between them, and those differences do make a big impact on the stuff that you can put inside. I will try and keep things as clear and as simple as possible as we work through the main body of the review, and then when we get to the conclusion I will try and go a little bit more in depth and explain how those, you know, differences can make some pretty severe impacts on the choices that you'll be able to make. So hopefully I'll be able to keep it, you know, all perfectly understandable for you all. But I'm going to stop now. I'm going to bring you in, as we always do, for a closer look at the cases, and then we'll start the main body of the review. Okay then, apologies about any shadows because of me moving in front of lights, but I've not got an infinite amount of lights that I can put up in the office, so we are going to have a few shadows as we work our way through. Now, just to say right from the beginning, the black one is the MATX version, the white one is the ITX version. So this is like the essentially the same as the original BitFenix Prodigy ITX internals on this side, and this is the new kind of layout on this side. Now straight away from this view we can see that we have a difference in where the I/O is. So on the MATX version you have the power, the reset, the audio and the USB 3s on the left hand side as you will look at it, but on the ITX version it's on the right hand side and lower down as well. The only other real place that you can tell the difference between these two cases is the back, because obviously that's the business end, as you would expect. And you can see that we've got a horizontal ITX and then a vertical MATX. On the MATX we've still got 120 and 140 millimeter, but whereas if you look on the ITX you can see that the 120mm sits in the middle. The 120mm fan on the MATX sits up in the top right hand corner and sits further up. Essentially the only real differences between the two is expansion slots and the way that the motherboard is placed. As far as motherboards are concerned anyway, obviously you can see here that they've obviously had to use a lot more of the real estate to allow for the motherboard to be fitted. But on this side we can see that we do have access at the back for the power supply, and that's another place where visually there is a massive amount of difference, and I'm gonna do it by spinning them round just to show you. So if we have a look on the bottom, all there is on the bottom, I'm just looking, make sure that you can see. Okay, I'll move the camera light. There we go. As you can see on the bottom of the ITX we've got the power supply, dust filter, which goes on the bottom, and that's all of the intake that you have on the bottom. The rest is completely sealed. On the MATX version you can see that the power supply is actually here, and there's a cable that comes around and up, and you can still plug the cable in the back of the case, but the power supply is planted right at the front. And there's also this magnetic filter which you can remove, which opens up. You can put fans in the bottom should you wish. There's a 120mm one fitted, but there is space to put another 120mm one there as well. But there's also mounts for hard drives in the bottom of the case as well. Now this cover is just so that if you don't want to use that, you can cover it up and it acts as like a dust filter, and well, not a dust filter, but it actually stops the airflow altogether. You do need to sit it properly to get it to cover it all up, but it does sit there nice and flush. But if you want to use the airflow, you whiz it off. I would have thought the majority of you are going to end up wanting to remove this to utilise this airflow, because as you'll see in a minute, when we get inside, there's the airflow really does flow from top to bottom rather than front to back. But we will cover that in a sec. So that's it, that's that fitted. What I'm going to do now is just move the camera so that I can show you the roof. Right then, okay, so moving on to the roof, just a quick look here, because it is all pretty much identical as far as this is concerned. I do always have trouble getting these out. I'm going to take both of them out just so I can show you. Now the ITX one is empty because it's only really just arrived. I've had the MATX version for a little while, and we do have a H100 fitted, but I've got this fitted in here to be able to cover more stuff when we get inside. You can fit 220mm fans up here should you wish. It is locked to 120s. The spacings are 15mm, which means you can put water cooling radiators in if you want. If you want to have a look at the Prodigy, we have done a Prodigy video review with water cooling options and stuff. But with the MATX version, obviously we've got water cooling options there as well, but when we get inside you have to be very specific about your choices. You can't, before anyone does ask, there isn't enough room to be able to put fans outside of here, because you can see that as we've got it fitted here, we've got the H100 and the fans fitted underneath. There's not enough room to be able to fit fans on the outside and still get the grill on. There's about 3 or 4 mil in it, and if you're using a water cooling radiator, the thin slimline fans really don't give you enough static pressure, and in my opinion they're a waste of time for stuff like this. Maybe if you really needed a slim fan for just airflow in the case, fair enough, but as far as water cooling radiators are concerned, static pressure is the most important thing. But essentially the top parts of the cases are exactly the same. The difference really comes with how the inside of the case works with that roof panel. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to move the Prodigy, we're going to move the MATX version off to one side, and we're going to spend a little more time concentrating on the layout and how things look inside the MATX version. Okay then peeps, so I've got the case on its side, and that's just so that I can, I've taken the 2 thumb screws off. This is essentially the back panel, because as we can see the motherboard's here, and when we remove the case, that's what we're faced with. This is a very similar type of look to what we would have expected in the original Prodigy or the MATX version, but obviously it would have been on the other side. This plastic panel here you can mount solid state drives to, and the solid state drives slide in this side. So there's a fair few options there, but then we've got the I/O panel up here. Now one thing I will say is there's very, very little room in the back area of the case for cables, but to be fair, there's not really anywhere that you would need to use the cables other than for fan cables and the like. I've kept that loose. It was connected up earlier on, but it was just something that there is a slot here that you can put the fan cable up through, and that's really about all that you're going to need to put on the other side of this. Where the power supply and everything is all directly on the other side, this area here is like a kind of like a storage point to hide your cables, rather than it being all in the back panel. Normally with the back panels, the reason why they're up here is because there are grommets to push your cables through and stuff. But because space is so short on this, there's no grommets at all for the motherboard. The motherboard pretty much takes up the bulk of the case. So this area behind where the power supply would be is the only area that you've got to kind of stash and conceal any of those unsightly cables. If you can spend some time on it, it can be done tidily, but it's never going to be kind of completely hidden, just because of the layout of the case. Now I'm going to bring the case around again, reposition the camera, and we'll have a look on the business side of things. Right, okay then peeps, so I've taken the side panel off. As you can see, there's no window in there. We're not sure whether they're going to bring window panels out or anything like that yet. It is just a simple steel side panel. As you can see, this is one of the areas where you can fit more hard drives. Now we fitted an SSD in the side just to give you a visual representation of how it would look on the inside, and also what this panel will look like when it's being used. But what I'm going to do now, just so that we can see better on the inside, so I can show you around a little bit more, I'm going to remove the 4 screws, take this panel out, and then we can get a better look at what's going on in the motherboard area and have a look at the power supply and everything like that. Thank you, Mr. Courier. Okay then peeps, so to have a look, we've removed this panel on the side. Now to be fair, I probably wouldn't use that if I was going to be using this build myself. I probably would use the SSD mounts in the back panel. If you have a mechanical hard drive for storage, I've already pointed out that you've got the mounts in the floor. Now it does come with a 120mm fan fitted in the floor, but there's still room that you can put a mechanical hard drive in the floor as well. So you could still run the cooling that it comes with and still be able to get a couple of solid state drives on the back, a mechanical on the inside, and you know, you're kind of away with it. Now, power supply, as you can see, is in the front. Now you can fit the power supply either way round. I have, for a change on this one, fitted it with the fan facing at the front. Now power supply fans, they suck in through the big fan and they exhaust out where the cables are. I've done it this way round just because there's very limited airflow inside this case. Now the way that the case comes set up is that the rear fan is blowing as an exhaust, the bottom fan is blowing as an exhaust as well. Now we have set up so that we've got a H100 in here. We have set that up so that's pulling air and blowing downwards, and that's probably the best way that you want to do it, because if you're running a dedicated graphics card in this, then the H100 will be blowing directly at your graphics card. Now I know that people are going to be saying, but that's going to be blowing hot air, Tom. Well, the problem is that all graphics cards again suck air. So if you were to take your H100 and flip these fans round so that the hot air was going out of the roof, then it would be in direct competition for airflow with the graphics card, because your cooler in the roof will be trying to blow one way and your graphics card's going to be trying to blow the other way. So your graphics card is more than likely going to really suffer. So if you want to use a H100, H100i, it doesn't fit the NZXT 140mm coolers because there's only 120mm mounts. You do need to have it so it's blowing downwards. Now, something else that we need to cover. MATX motherboards have obviously got a couple of PCI Express slots, so you could run SLI if you wanted. If you want to run SLI, you cannot run a H100 in the roof, because this the H100 and a set of fans takes up 2.5 slots at the back. So you can pretty much only get that cooler in and a single graphics card. If you want to run 2 graphics cards, then you're going to need to remove this and just have a standard air cooler, or something like the H80i fitted in the back. So that's also something that you're going to need to keep in mind. But don't forget, with MATX boards, if you do run 2 graphics cards, they're going to be right close together. So that does mean that the fans on the graphics cards will end up running faster to try and keep it cool, but they will run warmer as well. And that's just because there's not enough air for them to be able to breathe properly. So I would personally say that if you're going to be looking at getting the MATX version of this, because obviously the motherboards are cheaper than the ITX versions by quite some significant amount. This gene comes in at, I think it's around £160, and if you were to get the Asus ROG Impact, you'd be looking at something around the £180, £190. There's a significant saving that you can have there. I would say that I would still only go with a single graphics card. Still on the topic of graphics cards, you are going to end up running into some issues with your power supply. As you can see, we've used a fully modular power supply in this, and you can see that this is the reason why we've used this, is because we could use the white cables and it would be easier for us to show you in the video. But you're going to end up running into problems. Now, this is a standard, what I call a standard length power supply. It's 160mm, it's just normal ATX spec, it's not oversized or anything like that. But we've obviously got these modular cables fitted as well, which I would assume that most of you will end up using. If you want to get away from all these cables, you're going to end up with a non-modular power supply and then a load and load of cables on the other side. It will be a complete nightmare. But for graphics cards, I would say to keep clear of the power supply, you're going to be looking at about 230mm to 240mm absolute max. Any further over and you're going to end up running into issues with cabling on the end of your power supply, and it'll be one of those ones where we obviously can't say, you know, the be all and end all that's going to fit. That's not, but I would say kind of that length. This is just a AMD 260 in here at the moment. It's a nice short graphics card, and obviously the power supply is on this end. But if you were to get one of the other ones, then like I said, about 230, 240mm will be able to just keep you away from your power supply. If you can hear that noise, it's pretty much a monsoon outside at the moment. This also does mean that with the way that this kind of works with a cooler in the roof, it does mean that you've got kind of a confused airflow, because you're going to be forcing air down and out the case. And I would personally have preferred to have had it come in the other way, but there's no real way that we can get around that. So that's that. You can see the hardware that you've got in. There is plenty of room to have big coolers on this, because there's a 140mm fan in the back. Pretty much most of the tower coolers on the market will fit this. But something that I do want to mention, and this does, if I can just get this off, there we go. Something that I do want to mention is the front airflow. Now this really counts for the ITX one more than anything, because if I sit this down, put that over there, we need to rejig the camera. As you can see, we've got the fan for the power supply pulling in through the front. Now when we look at the front of the case, in fact I'm going to move this out of the way now. When we look at the front of the case, you can see those dots up the side here. I'm trying to do it so that you can see what I'm seeing, but you can see there are dots. There are basically 7 5mm holes in the side of the case, and there's nowhere else in this front panel for the air to get in. There's no mesh in the front, it's just those 7 holes. Now there is mesh in the side. Oh, you can see the holes better there, but those holes are all of the airflow that there is to get into the front of the case, and that's why we put the power supply that way around, because power supplies obviously don't need a massive amount of airflow, and it meant that we kept the kind of internal and external side of things a little bit clearer. But the problem is, on the ITX case, the ITX actually has a main inlet on the front of the case. So I'm just going to swap the cases around quickly just so that I can show you. Right, okay peeps, so on the ITX we've seen this before, very very prodigy front. On this one you can have 220mm fans in the front, you can put a 240mm radiator in the front if you want, you can take the optical bay out if you want, as you can with the other one. But the problem with the ITX version of the Phenom is, because that front is the main intake, there's no intake in the floor like there is the MATX. The only other fan spaces that you've got are in the roof and in the back. So this is generally what we would use as an exhaust unless you've got radiator in the roof, and then we'd spin it round. But this is a major intake point on the Phenom, but it has the same panel. We can see better on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 5mm holes. So when that's fitted to the front of the case, what I would say is the main intake for the case, it really doesn't have a lot of air there. And if you're going to have a 240mm radiator in the front, or a 200mm fan, this is going to really be struggling to get air through this. And because it's going to be struggling for air so much on this mesh, I would also say that you're going to end up probably getting a lot of dust in there as well, because it's obviously going to be forcing a lot of air into those small points. Now, if you were to use this, I would probably mod the as much of the plastic away down the side here as possible, just that that's open, you know, a lot more open. If you end up with a H100 or a 240mm radiator in the roof, I probably would still spin this fan around, so this ends up becoming an intake, so that you have the front as an intake, the back as an intake, and then the roof as part of the exhaust. You always want slightly more in than out to keep a positive pressure, because then it will force air out any of the little ducts rather than sucking it in. It actually can help combat dust. So that really is the main difference between the ITX and the MATX. And by that I mean how the design actually impacts what would be the performance and what you could possibly do with it. What I'm going to do now though is we'll break off to a conclusion, have a good chat about all of the things that we've covered here today, talk about the award, and then any recommendations that I might have for you as well. Okay then peeps, so moving on to the conclusion, we will start with the award, and then I will do my best to explain all the points. Now we're going to give it the value, or give them across the board the value for money award. We've always really liked the small compact nature of the BitFenix cases, and although the price has been kept really competitive, the build quality is still there. Now we do like the look of the Phenom. The Prodigy obviously had the handles and stuff, making them a little bit Mach 5-ish, but they were obviously built as land rigs, so you could use them as handles and feet, and those handles were pretty much bomb-proof. These have got more of a sleek kind of maybe front room, or maybe a minimalist bedroom style look to them. Real clean lines around the front. And I personally do quite like the look of them, but there are a few drawbacks. Now, as far as the MATX side of things is concerned, these points kind of relate into the Prodigy as well. Now they've obviously, essentially they've copied what the modders were doing with the original Prodigy, the ITX one, and pretty much every modder was flipping them up and sticking an MATX case, MATX board in there. And that's all well and good. And it's probably the best thing that you can do within that format, but by keeping the small footprint, it has made things quite limited as a retail product that people can just chuck hardware in. It does mean that when you fit a H100 in the roof that you are going to be quite limited with your graphics cards. As I showed you before, you need to make sure that H100 is blowing at your graphics cards. If you do run an AIO in the roof, it does mean that you can't run any more than a single graphics card in there. Now you could say that the point in having an MATX in the first place was so that you could run two, but the MATX boards themselves are cheaper than the majority of the ITX boards of a similar quality. So comparing the Gene to the Impact, for example, you could be looking at a £25 to £30 saving just on your motherboard that you can then spend more on your graphics, for example. Other points that you kind of need to remember with the MATX version is your airflow is pretty much top to bottom. You have got the rear exhaust, but there's no front airflow as such, because that's where the power supply is. If you're going to be running an AIO in the roof, your only choice is to run cold air in the top and then out through the bottom and the back, which is kind of what I would call reversed. If you do end up running a normal CPU heatsink, so like a tower heatsink or something, I would actually say I would be looking to perhaps switch everything round and have it so that it's bringing cool air in through the back and the bottom, and then chucking the hot air out of the roof with a couple of fans. Again, you could end up running into some, you know, graphics cardy type issues with the way it's all going to be going. You're really just going to have a play, really. The best thing I can say is if you are just going to be running an air cooler in there, run your cool air in the front and up the top, so have the fans that way. Undo a few screws, switch stuff round, and then see whether you get better or worse performance with it running the opposite way. I'm just kind of, you know, guesstimating stuff here, but really the only place that's going to have a massive impact on those type of temperatures, and they're the ones that you're going to be wanting to watch, are your graphics card temperatures. So kind of, you know, give it a go. The other thing that concerns me with these, and this is one of the reasons why we went with the Value for Money award rather than the Gold award, is the limited amount of airflow in the front. They've obviously done really well to keep that sleek look, but there's not a lot of, you know, spots there for air to get in. And on the MATX, it's not too much of a problem because you've got the power supply there, and that's not going to be specifically demanding. But if you're running the ITX, right, I'm going to go and answer the door one more time. Okay, I'm back. I should really start filming again, but I'm not going to. We were talking about the front end airflow on the ITX side of things. Obviously, the ITX has a major source of intake at the front of the case. There isn't any spots for being able to draw air in the bottom, and there's a big hard drive cage at the front as well, so it kind of, you know, stops you being able to do that. And I do worry that because of that being such a major source of intake with such a restricted flow on the front, any kind of high-end performance users may find this a little bit too restricting, and I would seriously tell you to have a look at modding the circle holes and maybe joining a few of them together. You could easily do the bottom ones, you could open that up, maybe open that one, and you could probably make 3 bigger holes, and you could even end up, you know, doubling or quadrupling the actual amount of air that you can get in the front of the case. The other option that you would have, I should have pulled the clips by the way, but I'm just trying to do this quickly so I can show you, is on the bottom of the case there is the handle where you can pull it out. Something that you could do would be to take the plastic out from this upper section so that there's air that can get in through the bottom. That's pretty much the easy ways of getting more air into the front of the case, and I do think that your temps would probably benefit because of it. You may even get a lot less air noise as well because you're not going to be sucking air in so hard. So this is only really going to be effective, for argument's sake, if you're running like a water cooling radiator or something in the front, which will be, you know, directly impact your temps. If you've just got an air heat sink at the back and you've got an exhaust in the roof, maybe just run that rear fan as an intake blowing straight at your air heat sink and out through the roof, and you may not notice too many problems because if you're running it that way, then you're probably going to end up having hard drives in the front area anyway, and then the limited airflow won't really matter that much. Because although people do say about, you know, active cooling on your hard drives and stuff, I've done significant testing in the past of passive cooling and active cooling on hard drives, and they don't really get that hot anymore. With for argument's sake, like a green storage hard drive, Western Digital Green, they don't really spin that hard anyway. You're not going to be using it all the time, so it's just going to be a storage drive, and it won't be getting stressed enough that you really need to worry about it. I've tried these in situations where I've had those hard drives spinning, you know, absolutely spinning their nuts off, and they don't get too hot. So I'm just trying to, you know, kind of point these things out for you because it's something that you do need to consider on this. And obviously the airflow on the inside is so different between these two cases. Even though the outside looks so similar, it's something that you do need to consider. Obviously with the aesthetics on these, they're kind of set up to be maybe smart looking low power home servers, so you might not need the airflow there at all, or much there anyway, or something really cool and quiet to maybe go in, like I said earlier, a minimalist bedroom or something to go in the front room. And if you're running them ridiculously quiet anyway, the airflow won't then be too much of a problem. But it was an issue that I thought was valid enough to me to bring up to bring it to your attention and consider. If the airflow does become an issue for you, like I've showed you already, there are ways that you can open things up to bring more air in, and maybe, you know, flick fans around and stuff to be able to combat these things and then them not become too much of a problem. If you do flick the rear fan round as an intake, you can get 120mm fan filters that you can fit really simply on the back. Some of them are magnetic, some of them screw on. There are really easy ways that you can still have them as an intake, but also keep the dust on the inside of your case down, which will obviously in the long term keep your maintenance schedule down as well. And if you do use the ones, like I said, where they clip on and stuff, when you do your hoovering, just make sure that you give them a clean. While we're talking about hoovering as well, slightly off topic, but the more you hoover, the less shit you'll end up with inside of your rig, because it'll end up in your hoover rather than ending up in your room and getting sucked in your PC, because your PC will be the best dust cleaner second to your hoover in your house. So your hoover will get the most of it, but if your rig's on loads, that will be where the rest of it will end up. So the more you hoover and clean, boys and girls, the tidier and the cleaner the inside of your PC will stay for a lot longer. But anyway, BitFenix Phenom, we've tried to cover as much as possible. I hope I've kind of got the points across. Very, very well. Like I said, for the looks and everything that it does deliver, it is good value for money. But because of those airflow issues, because of, based around the design, that's why we gave it value for money and slipped it past that gold point. But it's still a great case, it's still a great looking case, and it is still great value for money. And also something that you do need to kind of consider as well, as far as an MATX case goes, that is tiny. They're normally much bigger if you're talking ATX. So even though you have got, you're limited with space, the reason why you're limited with space is because they've made the case so small. So it's for those people that just want something very, very small and minimal. So hopefully I've covered all the bases and I won't get gazillions of comments about, whoa, Tom, you didn't do this, and whoa, Tom, you forgot to talk about that. So we'll see how we get on. But for now, at least, this is Tiny Tom Logan with the Value for Money award-winning BitFenix Phenom out. Ding! Hang on. Ding!